Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Allison Kaplan. I'm the editor-in-chief of Twin Cities Business. We appreciate you joining us over the lunch hour to think like an entrepreneur, something companies of all sizes, not just startups, are trying to do today. We've got a fantastic panel of innovators and disruptors joining us today to share stories and advice that just might inspire you to take a fresh approach to your work. For those of you joining us live today, feel free to use the comment section on your screen to ask our panelists questions. We've already got a handful of questions that we will be sure to get to a little later in the program. But before we begin, I just want to take a brief moment to share a message from our sponsor, Bridgewater Bank.
Hello. I'm Adam Benjamin, Senior Vice President of Professional Services at Bridgewater Bank. On behalf of everyone at Bridgewater, it is our pleasure to be here today. We're thrilled to partner with Twin Cities Business and bring you an impressive panel of experts. Our presence here today is a natural fit and reflection of our mission to continuously challenge the status quo. Bridgewater started with a vision in 2005 to create an entrepreneurial bank where answers came quickly, opportunities were plentiful, and the culture was optimistic. That unconventional attitude sets us apart from traditional banks, and our clients notice the difference. As entrepreneurs ourselves, we understand the commitment and vision it takes to establish and grow a business like yours. If you're looking for a local bank with true Minnesota roots, we'd love to have a discussion. Finally, like me, you are probably interested to hear about the experts the Twin Cities Business brings to us today. So let's sit back and enjoy the discussion.
All right, great. Well, let's meet our panelists. I know you're all excited. That's why you're here. So can I invite them to join us on the screen? There they are, Jazz Hampton, Joe Keeley, Dion Gums, and Kathy Toon. We're delighted to have you all here today. I'm going to do that awkward thing where I just do a little brief bio on each of you before we dive in, if that's okay. Let's start with Dion Gums, founder and CEO of Gen Equity, a financial technology platform that makes financial management and banking simple, intuitive, and accessible for more small businesses. Dion serves as a member of the advisory board of Epic Advisors, the board of Social Venture Partners in Minnesota, and Dion is an executive in residence with Lunar Startups, an accelerator focused on supporting Black, Indigenous, people of color, LGBTQ plus women and non-binary entrepreneurs. That's pretty much everybody. Thanks for being here, Dion. Dion is joined by Jazz Hampton, CEO and General Counsel of TurnSignal, a startup that's getting a lot of buzz lately. It's an on-demand, real-time service that provides 24/7 legal guidance from an attorney to drivers. Prior to co-founding TurnSignal, Jazz was an attorney at a national law firm as well as director of diversity and inclusion. He's also an adjunct professor at Mitchell Hamlin Law School. Thanks for being here, Jazz. Kathy Toon, we are delighted to have you join us. She is the CFO and Chief Operating Officer and Board Chair of Marani Health Incorporated, a digital maternal and fetal healthcare solution company. Her background includes venture capital and growth equity investing, M&A transaction expertise, business development, reimbursement strategy in companies ranging from startups to large organizations in healthcare in particular. She has an extensive background of community leadership involvement, serves on several nonprofit boards, including Gillette Children's Hospital and University Enterprises Laboratory. Thank you for being here, Kathy. Last but definitely not least is Joe Keeley, who I think has a distinction of, if I remember correctly, Joe, never having had a boss. Always been, you're the ultimate entrepreneur. Joe is CEO of Justify, a fintech solution created to help emerging platforms affordably build payment management software. This is not Joe's first startup. He started College Nannies, Sitters, and Tutors when he was in college. He has been an Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year winner. He's and College Nanny Sitters and Tutors is the nation's largest in-home childcare and tutoring company, serving tens of thousands of children and families. And we're excited to hear about his next venture. Thank you all for being here. And it's great to connect all of you, because I think it's the first time you're all meeting. So let's dive right in with this one. I know that all of you think in terms of problems and solutions. So will you talk a little bit about the problem that you're all working on solving with your startup right now? Jazz, you're in the top left on my screen, so let's start with you.
Yeah, no, first of all, thank you for the intros. That was smooth. So congrats on that. I know I wouldn't have done that well. I appreciate being here. When I think of Turn Signal and kind of our genesis story, it was myself and my two co-founders, two other Black men in the Twin Cities here, that were really looking to find a solution to the tragic ending to some police stops that Minnesota has unfortunately become infamous for, right? And what happened was we have one individual, Andre, one of my co-founders, that is a financial background, Spire Credit Union, Cargill, MBA. My other friend who was a tech sales background with a marketing degree, also an MBA, and then myself with a computer science undergrad degree and a law degree, right? And so we all have different skill sets that we could come together to build a solution for safer interactions when people are being pulled over or when they're in an accident. In our office hangs pictures like of Dante Wright here in the corner, of course, George Floyd, Philando Castile before that. And it really started at home for us because Andre and Mike grew up in St. Paul. They grew up playing sports with the Castile family. Andre went to JJ Hill, my co-founder did, went to JJ Hill where Philando worked, right? So it was larger than just our Minnesota community or our St. Paul community. It was our community that was being affected. And as three professionals with unique skills that could come together to build a solution, we almost felt like we weren't doing what we should be doing from a professional and moral standpoint if we didn't try to build something that could be an app to bridge the gap, as we always say. It's also, buttressed with my brother graduating from a law enforcement program right here in the Twin Cities, and understanding that if we can de-escalate these interactions, it's better and safer for everyone involved. And that ultimately is our goal and why we built this platform.
Amazing. Joe, what about you? What prompted the idea that you're working on right now?
Well, I was on sabbatical of sorts from my first company in the childcare, and we built some technology and franchising space. And like I think a lot of good ideas, was an intersection of the meeting of the minds and different ideas put together. So a friend of mine, Justin Koffenberg, who is the founder of Sports Engine, shared with me the details around their economic engine, which was they, over 15 years of grit, built some very impressive payment and financial technology that enabled them to really accelerate their potential. And as he told us the story, it was remarkably complicated and expensive to do. And we thought, well, maybe that's not right or even fair that platforms couldn't have the same outcome that they did. So we set out to rebuild and improve upon the playbook that made Sports Engine so successful and bring that to other platforms so that they can participate in the value, the payment volume, and the fintech potential that they have from the ecosystem that they create. So a little bit of a far cry from babysitting, but we can unpack that later maybe.
Okay, we'll get to that. Dion, obviously fintech near and dear to your heart and your focus as well. So tell us what you set out to do with Gen Equity.
Yeah, thank you. It's so exciting, first of all, to be here amongst all of these great panelists and entrepreneurs. So it's really fun. Thanks for bringing us together, Allison. For me, really, it's this massive push to global digitalization that we kind of see play out in the last couple of years. Right, where you have small businesses that are really struggling with the many multitude of digital tools that are available to them to adequately manage their finances, get the right banking products, get the right access to capital, right? You have old legacy systems, we have the old spreadsheets and paper trails that we all still kind of do. I'm old, I still write on paper and manage everything there. But we have a ton of new entrants into the market. that really don't talk to one another. And so the goal of Gen Equity really is to create this integrated business financial management solution that a big company would have access to because they have all the time, the resources, the infrastructure, but a small business will not have the access to. So our goal is really to drive key business efficiency by creating a really easy to use, robust enterprise grade financial transaction management system that's accessible to more small businesses around.
Great. And Kathy, finally, tell us a little bit about Marani and what provoked the idea.
Yeah, so thank you for having me as well. So, really started, so Marani's a digital platform for prenatal postpartum care. Prenatal and postpartum care in the US, it is a lot of to be desired. The outcomes are not good, not what they should be. And so that's the start of it all. And basically, my co-founder Anne spent time, she was spending time, a lot of time at the Mayo Clinic with some of the inventive physicians there, and ended up becoming an entrepreneur in residence with the Mayo Clinic, one of their ventures arm, and was working with one of the cardiologists and they came to the realization that there were a lot of cardiovascular technologies in the adult cardiovascular world that were applicable to fetal health as well, and so then the goal was to try to take some of those technologies, apply them to the fetal health world and maternal health world, and make it better because it was so old school. And so we've been working on that for several years, and then with COVID, we decided that the best application would be at home. So we've actually been working toward getting this into a telehealth model so that people can have better care during pregnancy and postpartum windows from their home. So that's the quick story.
Great. You make it sound so easy. I think there are probably a lot of people listening who are really envious of your ideas, because there are a lot of people who maybe would love to be an entrepreneur, but they're sort of waiting for that epiphany. They're waiting for that big idea. What advice would you give people who feel like they're sort of entrepreneurial minded? Maybe they want to start something of their own, but they haven't figured out what it is. Where do you begin, Joe?
Well, I think you begin by accepting that it probably isn't going to hit you like a lightning bolt. It could, but it exists all around you, and it is often takes, it's a little bit like perhaps the best pot of chili. We can still reference chili. It's still cold outside. It just takes a while to percolate, and I think the more that you force creativity and create pressure that I have to come up with this idea. Every single business I've been involved in, where it started was not where it ended up going. So there is a meandering journey that it takes. And I think that having pressure is good, having urgency is good, but you also have to accept that very, very few companies, if any, that I can recall, have it all figured out on day one. So you got to allow yourself time to bounce it off of other ideas and other people and fail a little bit to allow it the maturity to grow into its own.
Yeah, great advice. Dion and Jazz, both of you worked for other people, other organizations, large companies before venturing into entrepreneurship. Do you feel like it was always in you to go down this road, or was it the idea that took you there? Dion, do you want to go next?
Yeah, and I also want to say that I'm kind of jealous of Joe never having a boss, but I'm sure his family might think otherwise. We all
I think my board might think otherwise now as well, but we'll get to that.
Hey. But yeah, I think I've come from a traditional background, right, of banking and finance and asset management, and but I've always been an entrepreneur. Right. So, there's always been something in my DNA that says, what's the big problem or problem that I want to solve? And I can either solve it in the walls of the company that I sit in, or I can try to solve it elsewhere. And it's just a matter of kind of, for me, it was a matter of timing, right? In terms of when I decided to take this journey to do this on my own. But I mean, I remember I'm coming up on my 15-year business school reunion this weekend, and that in my essay, it says, right, I'm going to go amass all of this traditional knowledge, and then I'm going to start my own thing. I mean, so for me, it was always there. whether it was in the walls of big companies or now, externally.
Great. Jazz, what about you?
Yeah, I've always been argumentative and entrepreneurial. So I was born to be a lawyer and an entrepreneur from the jump. I think I started selling Jordans in the barber shop when I was 12 years old. So I've always wanted to run my own thing, but I knew that I wanted to receive an education first to have a solid foundation of something I could build on, and so that was really important to me. I just had a passion for the law, and I knew, it's really similar. I smiled when you were saying it, because I had a similar story when I had an ethical leadership course when I was in my last year of law school. When I was 23 years old, I wrote an essay that said, I'm going to go work at a big law firm, try to pay down some of my student loans, and eventually leave the job that I have at that law firm to use my law degree to help my community, specifically the African American community, in ways that I wanted to when I first joined law school. And I wrote that when I was 23 in my last year of law school, and I left when I was 29 after practicing for 6 years at a law firm. It was the road that I knew I wanted to go on. I didn't know it would be so direct. I thought maybe I'd go work at a nonprofit or work with, hopefully at the ACLU. My resume maybe wasn't strong enough yet, but I knew that I wanted to do something to help, and just the timing and everything worked out. And to your earlier question, I just think whenever you're looking at taking the jump and doing something, it has to be within something that you have a solid knowledge base or experience in. And if you don't have it yet, you should go get it. I wouldn't dare try to start a finance company right now because, as Dre knows, my CFO, that isn't my strong suit. But it's definitely, you have to build the skills before you can really jump in feet first. So. For sure.
Advice. Kathy, I'm curious what advice you have. You come at this from a different point of view. You see, you're investing, you're involved in a startup. What would you say? What is your advice for people who want to go down this path, maybe don't have that, $1 million idea in their head?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think I do. I've been doing this between investing and entrepreneurship for 20 plus years. And I've looked at thousands of companies over my career, looking as from the investing lens. And I would say there are a lot of places to look. I have never had an idea that would be backable, I'll tell you, on my own. So, it's there, but there's a lot out there. I do work with the university, with the Mayo Clinic, with other facilities, and there are ideas everywhere, and you'd have to go hunt for them. And that's why some of these organizations have programs to bring entrepreneurs and residents in-house and look through the portfolios of their technology, because really it's the actions of the founders and the team that make it something, right? The idea is only an idea until somebody takes it and puts something around it and makes it real. And the ideas are there everywhere. And I think, but you do need to get out of and COVID has made it really much harder to do this, but get out and look, right? Get out and talk with people and talk with institutions to identify the needs and find technologies. Now, we all might have ideas too, but in the healthcare field, it's more typical to go find them, from find somebody's patent and things like that to execute on. But it does take a lot of time and a lot of focus.
Right.
It's passion, Allison, as well. I mean, I think a lot of folks who are passionate about something, I think of, we could feel it in Jazz's story and others. And so it's often hiding in plain sight, because it's really hard. It's hard to grow a company, and ideas I don't think are the issue. It's the execution and the energy behind it, and getting others to leave their job and come work for you when all of the spidey sense is going off to say they shouldn't. But so I would say, really focusing in on what do you know and what are you passionate about, because there's all different kinds of entrepreneurs and there's all different kinds of companies. Just because, plastered on, Inc. is venture funded companies, that isn't any more or less of an entrepreneur that someone decides to open an Etsy shop for themselves. They have different economics and different outcomes, but we should be careful of, rating and labeling but it starts with passion and what you know.
Good point. So let's talk a little bit about the execution. You all have the ideas, you have the passion. What did you do next when the idea of each of your current ventures started percolating? Did you sketch out a business plan? How early did you start raising money? What were some of the key steps that you took to turn it into a business? Jazz?
Yeah, I think, we went down a lot of the typical lines. And the first was trying to find a product market fit, making sure that for those who don't know, Turn Signal is an app that you have on your phone. When you're pulled over, you press a button or use voice activation, and it instantly records the interaction and video conferences a lawyer into that interaction to de-escalate the interaction and get you and the officer home safe, right? And protect your rights. So when we started thinking about that, we had to talk to stakeholders to say, is this something that would work? Is the timing going to be there? How would officers feel? So we met with 20 plus police officers. We met with members of the community who really felt like they needed this kind of solution. We did market research to find out who the people that would want the product most would be. It was all, and it's tough because you just want to go. As an entrepreneur, it's like you want to build it and start tomorrow. But if you don't do that groundwork, you're just going to be taking steps back in the near future. And of course, if you don't have a technical person, you have to find the technical someone with the technical wherewithal to help you build it as well. So that was kind of where we started. We had to just do a lot of information gathering, and that was the first, honestly, 6-8 months of making sure. Because if you just start building something, and what does Zig Ziglar say? If you aim at nothing, you'll hit it every time. And I truly believe in that. So.
And Jez, did you from the start, did you and your co-founders did you envision it as this app that you have in your car that connects you in real time? I mean, was that the original vision, or did you have to get to that after a while?
It was. The original vision was an app that gets a lawyer into the car. And I think Zoom and kind of the world we're in now spurred the video aspect. And we always say we're telelegal, right? Because telemedicine is in such a real space. And so we're the first in the telelegal space, instantly on demand. And we always say, you go to your primary care physician or whoever, but we need an emergency doctor in the legal form here, right? We need it now, we need it soon. And then later you can take care of it with your primary lawyer, right? Just like in the medical setting. So we knew we needed to put people in the car as quickly as possible. So we knew we needed to build a network of attorneys that would be available. But we knew the app was where it would go right away. But to Joe's point earlier, it has changed so much since we started with how it's calling people, with the type of lawyers. So now, obviously, being in an accident as well, you can use it. And it's really opened up who is using our app as well, from a narrow market that we had to being a really diverse and big pool of users that have different needs. So it definitely changes and grows. I absolutely agree with what Joe said earlier.
Dion, let's go to you next. What you started with a big, bold mission. How did you begin to turn that into a business plan?
Yeah, I knew that the kind of failure rate plaguing small businesses, particularly businesses run by people of color and women, was just unpalpable, right? And it doesn't create great economic engines long term. And so that was kind of the big vision. How do we kind of stop this problem and use technology to do that? I think the same that Jazz just mentioned, going out to the market, right? So I had an idea of what a problem was based on what I'd seen from clients, whether they were successful or not over the last kind of 15, 20 years, but going out and testing that, right? What is actually stopping you, whether it's from getting capital, managing your business, scaling and growing? What are some of the things? And so that we also probably spent about 6 to 8 months, maybe a little longer, right? Testing the market around the country, talking to business owners to really refine the thing that we knew we wanted to solve. And that was kind of the first thing. I think the other thing was talking for us, right? Because we knew we wanted to build technology and how quickly that, using tech and how quickly that space moves, we also wanted to make sure that we talked to technology stakeholders, people that had already been there, done that, big and small, as well as some of the other people that would be interacting within the small business ecosystem, right? So financial institutions, lending institutions, creditors, anyone that touches a small business from a financial standpoint, accounting, accountants and accounting software providers, so we could get a better understanding of what the gaps were, not just from the business owner standpoint, but also from a provider standpoint. And that took another couple of months, and that's kind of an iterative process that keeps going, but it was part of our product market fit, right? I don't think we could have created a process and go to market to grow and scale the way we envision that we want to without doing some of those initial building blocks, right? So including as many people as possible. I think a tendency when you come up with something is like no one's, you feel like you have to protect it. But the reality is you have to expose it to the world to kind of gut check and test some of those assumptions.
Great advice. Kathy, with the medical field, it's a long road. Talk about some of the early steps from the idea that gave birth to Marani to getting it where it is today.
Yeah, good question. Yeah, healthcare it does take a long time. And we have digital platform and a physical device too. So it's a little shorter because our digital platform is more typically software, but it's still complicated. But in terms of Marani, luckily with the Mayo Clinic involved, there was the Entrepreneur Residence Program there was a great ability to be on site there and do research directly with the physicians there, which is an amazing resource to have. If you don't have that, and most companies did not have that, then you've got to find some space and be very scrappy with how you might be sort of the garage based, if you will, early research that you might do on proof of concept, what sort of mechanical engineering or electrical engineering you might be able to do just to do early proof of concept. Luckily for us, we were able to sort of tap into the resource at the Mayo Clinic to be able to do some early technical evidence work. And like everybody else has talked, we hear the market research aspect, the product market fit research is critical. And so we've talked to several hundred now, more than that really at this point, stakeholders in the field. And for us, that mix of people are the people who might use it, the physicians, the people who would pay for it, the payers. So we have to explore all those avenues are you interested as a patient? Are you interested as a doctor? Are you interested from the payment side, which is in the healthcare field, one of the most critical things of all, because it can be as great as you want it, as it possibly can be. But if the payers are against it for whatever reason, it's not going to go anywhere, right? So that's a big part of what we did research on too, is how does it get paid for and how are the payers viewing it? So it's a lot of what everybody's talking about here, with a little bit of a mix in terms of some of the physical aspects of needing to do the proof of concept product from a physical point of view.
Sure, got it. Joe, so from that conversation with Justin, where you assessed the opportunity, then what? What did you do next?
Well, I think it's a little bit of a Goldilocks strategy in some regards, where it's not too much and not too little. I mean, I think you can get caught in building, all kinds of reams of paper of business plan, and you can certainly plan too little. And like many things, I tend to fall a little bit in the middle of that. So it's really about, I would say, making it simple to start. And if you pass that gating, then you can dive in and get a little bit more detailed. So you always hear people say, well, we need to make that better. And I say, in the entrepreneurship space, you just need to make it. And make it bad, and then you can make it better. So I would say, just really simple, what is the problem you're trying to solve in plain English? And does someone else understand that, yeah, that's a problem? Then you can say, well, how am I going to solve that problem? So you have problem, you have solution. I don't think that venture capital it's clearly not for every type of entrepreneur and every type of business, but I think taking a page out of a successful venture capital seed stage deck, they're often simple, they're often very short. And it is about, here's the problem, here is our solution, here's the size of market, here's how we're going to make money, this is what we need, this is what we're going to go build or do. any questions. So really just get the building blocks. So that's what we did and tested it. And then we put together, a number of other folks talked about customer research. And I think some of these terms I 100% agree. And yet some of these terms can feel overwhelming, I think, for a first-time entrepreneur. I went to school for entrepreneurship and I still felt a little overwhelmed at times. So I think what we did is we put together what we call a product advisory council. And it was our friends, people that we knew, people that we could lean on and say, we're going to have a series of 6 phone calls. We'd love it if you would just let us fail in a safe environment, ask questions, tell us what you think about things. Because, it's pretty easy to fall in love with your own cooking. So you got to go out and test a little bit to see if it indeed tastes good.
I like that. How early in the process, everybody here has raised money, all of your ventures require outside funding. How early did you start thinking about that? How do you figure out the right cadence? When is it too early? When is it too late? Kathy, do you want to start on that one?
Yeah, it's a challenging one because it's almost never too early because entrepreneurs need to get, they need to eat dinner, right? You got to be able to do that too. So it is a real challenge. Typically what I would say is, that early round of capital is your friends and family, typically, right? It's people who very well, and they're willing to put some risk capital into your venture without a lot of knowledge of what it is that's going to happen, right? So that's a critical piece. It's hard to, a lot of people don't have the ability to wait to raise money because otherwise they'd have another job, which they probably do too, right? Which makes it hard to run their new business. So I would say pretty early, but after having, knocked a bit of the risk off the table, do a little bit of the research to know that the product is fitting some need that has been identified. But I think you're probably certainly within that first 12 months of getting things going, you almost have to raise some capital. And then after that, unfortunately, it's always a cycle of raising capital for the companies as they're growing. But I think you do have to start pretty early.
Deanne, you and I talked recently about how that the raising of funds can feel like another job in and of itself. And it's almost like, especially when you're small and nimble, it's like you have to take your attention off of the business to do the fundraising. How do you juggle that?
Once I figure that out, I will get back to you on that one. But it really is true. I think, the timing of when funds come into the business is so critical to Kathy's point. But, we all, right, many of us say and know these stories. We just all don't have, a resource that says, hey, do you have an extra couple $100 grand that you can kick on over here while I go build this thing? So it does take its own, even in that kind of pre-seed friends and family round, right? If you don't have access to some of those networks, it can take a bit more time, right? I think, the notion of what can you build with what you have does become really important, right? But, sometimes we do think that we need to build the whiz-bang version of our product. And sometimes it's not the whiz-bang version. It's the prototype that you can get probably maybe someone at the U to build online for you so you can showcase and go out and test. So there's so many different ways to be creative in the fundraising process that I think we don't talk enough about, right? Because we read all the stories of people raising 25 million, 30 million off of this random idea. And the reality is, that's just not what happens, right? There's always something, even if it's a prototype version, that allows you to gain traction and insight. And I would say focus on what your business is actually going to do and solve, to Joe's point, because unless you can answer those questions cleanly, you cannot sit in front of any investor and explain why they need to give you more. So you really have to understand the fundamentals of your business and then take your eye off the ball to some extent to go raise money. That's, we're very systematic about that, and we're in the middle of the room right now.
I'd argue that not every business needs outside capital either. I mean, I think stepping back and saying, if the world is full of a diverse group of entrepreneurs and diverse businesses, some absolutely, it's what kind of business are you? what kind of capital, how much, and when? Those are the questions you have to answer, because if you have a, venture, a business that requires, very heavy tech product, big market, lots of incumbents, that requires venture capital, and you're going to bootstrap that yourself, but it's probably not going to work very well. And if you have a lifestyle business, again, not any more or less, better or worse entrepreneur, and you go out and take friends and family money and try to raise institutional capital, you're not going to have a lot of success there either. So I do think it's determining who are you, what is the type of business you're attempting to get off the ground, and then match the capital needs to that. Because I think there is a feeling sort of that everything needs to be Silicon Valley funded. And my first company, virtually no outside capital other than bank debt, and we used to say you could only mortgage your house really once, and that turned out not to be true. And then the second go round, we raised capital, VC capital, right out of the gate. And we'll do that in a traditional, ABC round, because it's a big build with big folks out in the space. So it's about matching that capital structure and what type of business that you're building.
That's a really great point, Joe. And I think there is this pressure today, because you do see these companies raising just these unbelievable amounts of cash, that it's like, that's the thing that legitimizes the business. And that's really not the right measure for you. As you were saying, it's about, you need that money to be able to build at the scale that Justify is building at.
Yeah, and the market is, the business plan and the economics, other people's money is not sort of flippantly given away. So there is a, how big is the market? What is your, economics to plan to, your economic engine to take advantage of that market? We're in the financial services, fintech space, we're talking trillions of dollars. So, that makes a big difference. And then what is your vision, and what is the greatest likelihood that the investor is going to believe you're going to be able to execute on that? That's very different than, it's been my dream to open, a neighborhood cafe. That's a different need. Again, wonderful, follow that dream, but the economic structure is going to be different, ought to be different.
Of course. Jazz, how did you approach it for Turn Signal? Did you start raising money right away?
The week that I quit my law firm job, we had moved into a new house the month before. We found out we were pregnant with our third child, and we already had a 2 and a 1-year-old, or a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old at the time. And daycare isn't free, and my wife works full time. So we started raising right away for a litany of reasons, and I'm just one of the 3 of us. So, and to Joe's point as well, we had to build tech, which isn't free. So we started right away. But I think I'm a little unique in the line of, I love raising money. I think it's wildly similar to litigation, right? You collect evidence, you know what your case is, you are a zealous advocate, so you truly believe in what you're saying, and you believe it to be true, and you want to go out there and test it and have the jury listen and say, wow, that is right. That's why I love stepping in front of investors, because I'm saying, I'm so passionate about this, and we built a product and a model that works and makes sense. And if I can't convince you of it, then I'm wrong, and don't give me the money, but I think I can. And it's so much like being in a courtroom, that I love that process. And but you have to collect the evidence, just like in litigation. And if you don't know what your CAC is, and where your market is, and who is the person that you're going to be speaking to, then you won't be prepared to step into those conversations. But don't get me wrong, it was a bumpy road at the beginning. I didn't know how to step into that world at first, but we've learned a lot in the process, and we started right away. And the last thing I'll say on that also is, we were first-time entrepreneurs, all 3 of us. I didn't know the Reeds, the Mary and Steves, the Bread and Butter, the Brett Burrell, and all of I didn't know any of these people. I had never stepped in this world. Now I feel like all of us live in South Minneapolis and like are walking our dogs in the same neighborhood, right? But not knowing those communities was tough at the beginning. And slowly learning them and saying, okay, so this person is here, And okay, so Justin used to run Sports Engine, and then one of his investors was this group, and now he's a part of this group at Rally. And learning all of that, it's almost like the entire Minnesota community, where it's so welcoming, but you just have to get in there first. And getting to know these people, I feel like the circles are small and they're willing to have conversations, but a lot of outside of Minnesota folks kind of find it difficult to break in. But once you do, I think all the people really are great.
Yeah, Minnesota has that reputation. Note to self, always start a company with a litigator on your team. That seems to be Kathy, I'm curious for you as a person who is often on the other side of the equation, making decisions about the capital. How do you feel? How should people approach you? How do you feel about those, cold calls or emails or people connecting you with someone? What's the best strategy to getting into this community, as Jazz was just talking about?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it's not just this community. I mean, the community of investors is a community that's got a lot of unique aspects to it. And I think cold is hard because it's, time is probably the investor community's most limited resource. They see thousands of deals a year. That's their job if they're an institutional investor. So that's what they do. They have a pile of deals on their desk and they're trying to triage them every day. Which one am I going to spend time on? How am I going to sort my way through all of this? And so one of the sorting mechanisms is warm or cold, unfortunately, a lot of times. For a lot of people, it is that way. So get warm introductions if you at all can in any way. I mean, it's just going to really, really elevate the introduction to a different place. And so and then it's targeting too, right? If you, I think to Jazz's point, know the people, do they invest in your space or not? If not, it's not worth it. It's not worth your time because it's a mismatch and it's not going to be worth it for you, and they're not going to respond, or it's just not going to, it's going to be a no, right? So it's sort of doing that map of who's who, what do they do and why, how big a check size, all of the things that you would map out to see, is it a fit for me or not? And then who is there and how do I get from me to them, which there are a lot of tools to be able to do that right today. So it's not as hard now as it used to be. When LinkedIn is a great place to sort of look for that connectivity. So I think, I mean, it's a lot of, it's pretty logical really, but it does take a lot of time to map that out. And I think most people are more like Dion in terms of fundraising is a bit, maybe not the favorite thing to do. That's not my favorite thing to do. And Jazz is on the other side of that, which he loves it. And that's more rare, I would have to say. So I'd rather run the business than raise money any day.
Right. Question. I want to make sure we get to some questions from our audience. We have a bunch of good ones that came in before and a couple that are in the chat right now. Jim asks, are IP and brand protection effort decisions scaled the same way as investment scaling decisions? Anybody want to take a stab at that? It's a hard one.
I mean, in the healthcare arena, IP is critical. So we tend to spend a lot of time on IP. Brand is becoming more and more important in healthcare too. I'm guessing across the board of where we are today, everybody on this table would say, or this panel would say, brand is pretty important in their fields. We did trademark protection. We did a brand project to get our name and brand identity sort of in a good place. So we spend in the early phases a lot of time on all of those things. A lot of software technology doesn't have IP, so there probably is a little more, certain industries need it and certain don't. For us, we did need it.
Thanks, Kathy. A lot of questions about just doing the entrepreneurial juggle. So maybe we'll end with each of you commenting on that one. It's not a 9-to-5 job. What each of you is doing. How do you manage it all? How do you balance your time? How between all the aspects of the business, family, life, and sanity? Dion, you want to start?
Loaded question. So I start my day really early. My husband gets up really early to to work out and tends to travel a lot. So I'm actually sitting at my computer at 4:30 because I have 2 small kids and I need time in the morning, right? I've got my own ritual and level setting for the day. So I need time in the morning before I wake them up and get them ready to school and then get them on the bus and then, start my day. That's just me. So I think structure is really important for someone like myself because I'm involved in a lot of philanthropic efforts that are really important to me and commitments. I'm involved in my community in a different way that requires a lot of high touch. I have 2 small children, a traveling husband, and a startup, right? And I have aging parents. So I have to be really, really diligent about time spent on what and how. That's a discipline that continues to evolve, but it is just the way I attack trying to get this done. So that's just me.
Sure. Anybody else have a foolproof strategy?
I don't know that it's foolproof, but I think that, look, it's hard. Let's not candy coat it. And you're trying to get 30 hours into a 24-hour day. One of the things I would say is just understanding the different milestones. And one of the things I did in the early days where I didn't have capital in my first company is I tried to replace myself or work hard enough so that I could hire someone and replace myself out of one of my jobs every 6 months. So starting to get to a place where you get to only do what only you can do. That is the fundraising things that are, the leadership things, and then bring in people as you are able to. But as it relates to the intersection of community involvement, family, friends, work, and how these don't seem to mesh together, over the longer term, I think balance is something that is achieved not in a day or a week, but over the longer term. And one thing that I found to be remarkably helpful is trying to create Venn diagrams. How can I intersect some things that, like I've been on the Children's Theater Board for 9 years. So that's been something that my kids feel like they've been on the Children's Theater Board for 9 years because we've been there together and doing things. So it's been a way for me to give back in the community, network with other business professionals, and bring my family into the mix. So looking for those opportunities to have, your Venn diagram moments.
I love that. Jazz and Kathy, I'm going to ask you for one different final thought. And that is, a lot of people might not, quit their job tomorrow and run out to start something, but they would like to kind of capture the entrepreneurial spirit or thinking in their large company, small company. What advice, what inspiration would you give just to our theme today, which is, thinking like an entrepreneur wherever you are?
Yeah, I think it's funny you say that. When I was at a law firm, I didn't do everything I could to be entrepreneurial in the sense of going to get new clients or attending that event where potential clients will be and seeing if they need litigation assistance or going out and doing that work. I did actively, but I could have been a lot more proactive about that. And now, as a person running a business with a team of 9 or so folks here, I love when folks are coming up to our leadership team and saying, hey, I have this idea. What if we do X, Y, and Z? And doing that within any role, whether you're at a startup or you're at a Fortune 5, it really shows that you have that entrepreneurial spirit. And now, in the seat that I'm in now, it's really exciting as a member of the team to see other team members doing that. So whether it's coming up with new ideas to find new clients, or whether it's a new technology that can be implemented and help a process and operationalizing something, doing that within your current role not only is going to be helpful for the organization and those that work on your team, but it's the first step. And maybe if you eventually want to get out and do something on your own, and learning that process, because it's just that over and over and over again.
Great advice. Kathy, we'll let you have the final word.
No, that's a great
entrepreneur.
Yeah, that's a great idea that Jazz was mentioning. And I think in today's world, there's so much opportunity for people inside a big organization to explore tech solutions for their team, or things like, I mean, especially we just had one of those the other day, and I'm just like, okay, somebody go figure out which of these tech solutions is fit for us, because there are so many choices out there. So you can have a market research project that you do within your own organization to figure things out like that. And so that's an avenue. I mean, asking to do more things within the org that are different from your own current job, and they're usually that's appreciated within the organization. And then attending other events outside your organization, getting out there, talking with people, of course, is really important. And in today's market where recruiting and retention is really, really challenging, I think a lot of larger organizations are going to be really open-minded to how do they keep you. And in order to keep you, they're going to have to keep you interested and keep you learning. So I think there's actually a window right now where people can do a lot of learning and exploring with their company.
Right. Great point. Wow. I could keep firing questions at you all afternoon, but I want to be respectful of your time. I want to thank all of you for joining us, for all the great advice. Joe and Dion have been on our podcast, our TCB podcast, by all means. So go listen to them. And Jazz and Kathy, we're going to have to get you on very soon. Thank you all so much for the advice. And now I'm really excited to invite Adam Benjamin to join us. Thanks, you guys. From Bridgewater Bank for his perspective to add to the conversation. Adam, wasn't that inspiring? Great advice.
That was an awesome panel. Thanks.
I knew you would enjoy it. And I know that you have a lot of thoughts on entrepreneurship as well. We talked a little bit about how entrepreneurs are risk takers by nature. And one of the important first things you have to do is set up a team. Make sure that you have a team of advisors. We heard a little bit about that. So tell us your advice for setting up that team.
Right. And I think at the end of the day, it ultimately boils down to mitigating some risk, because often as entrepreneurs aren't looking to improve a small idea on the margins, they're often leading into embracing some large ideas and taking on some inherent risk in the process. So having those trusted advisors is something I think, we've heard from everyone on the panel today, Dion, Jazz, Joe, Kathy. I think it was a common theme, who you surround yourself with. And who is your sounding board, right? It's critical. So where do you go for fresh ideas? Who are your shoulders to lean on? Who's your source of honest feedback? Finally, where are you going for support in your decision-making? I think what I've seen in my years as a banker and by working with entrepreneurs and business owners, is that team is often comprised of, fellow entrepreneurs, the people we saw on the panel today, their loved ones. We talked about friends and family. Trusted friends, business advisors, oftentimes those are accountants, even a bank like Bridgewater, maybe some sort of an operating system. We're big believers in EOS, or the Entrepreneurial Operating System. It's called Traction. That's a great tool for those of you who are listening today as well. It's really important that you have people that you can go to for your design and your implementation of your ideas.
Right. Great advice. Bridgewater is entrepreneurial in its own right. Talk a little bit about your approach and mindset and how you work with entrepreneurs.
Absolutely. I think you could trace it back to when our founder, Jerry Bach, started his business plan. He left his cush job and started his business plan in his basement. That was about 17 years ago. He had some really big ideas to kind of challenge the status quo. In the world of banking, we think the bar is set pretty low from a service and responsive standpoint within banking. Oftentimes you can start by picking up the phone and getting in touch with people, and they really appreciate working with a human and not a 1-800 number. So we take a lot of pride in that. And the idea was to disrupt banking. We started by leveraging our own networks of friends and family. And I think we capitalized the bank with 100 local entrepreneurs who invested in the bank and the holding company so we could start it. And then we grew from 100 to 250 local shareholders before we actually went to New York and rang the closing bell at the NASDAQ and were listed. We went through the IPO process. So we understand that life cycle of a business and what many entrepreneurs essentially hope to achieve. And a lot of people who are here today, who work here, have a real passion for operating a business, right? They enjoy wearing many different hats because we've actually worked on and built the business from the ground up. And 17 years wasn't all that long ago when we started the bank. We're still here and we understand it for sure.
That's great. Final, just a piece of advice that you or inspiration for kind of capturing that entrepreneurial thinking, or our theme of the day.
Right. I think, within the context of entrepreneurial spirit, mindset, and leadership, I think everyone in this panel, again, Dion, Jazz, Joe, Kathy, maybe you, Allie, was new to their craft at some point, right? Before you began to sharpen your acumen, your tools, and develop that trusted team. And it's really important that you realize that everybody started somewhere. Don't hesitate to reach out to the other experts in the field because they weren't experts before they started learning what the business and what their industry or their startup was all about. So learn from their experience, right? And adopt that entrepreneurial mindset. It may take some time to build, but growth happens when we embrace some healthy friction, a little discomfort. And that's what I've heard from the panel today. Put yourself out there, share some ideas, develop your advisors, your trusted panel, and just trust in the process.
Right. Great advice. Adam, thank you so much. Such a fun time to talk to you. And thank you so much to our sponsor, Bridgewater Bank, for making this event possible. We really appreciate it. And Adam, you've got a cool new office there. I can see the view in the background. That's such a great space. Everybody should
check it out.
That's right. That's right. Well, thank you all so much for joining us today, and for participating as well. Great feedback and great questions. We always appreciate that. A recording of this webinar will be available soon on our website at tcbmag.com. You can check it out, go through the highlights if there was a quote that jumped out at you, and please share it with your friends and colleagues as well. Again, thank you so much on behalf of everyone from Twin Cities Business and Bridgewater Bank for joining us. Have a fantastic afternoon.